In March 1847, General Winfield Scott assembled an invasion force of about 12,000 men, the largest U.S. amphibious operation until World War II, nearly a century later. With the support of the U.S. Navy, his troops landed near Veracruz in a coordinated assault. The siege of Veracruz lasted about 3 weeks. U.S. artillery pounded the city while naval forces cut off supplies. Facing destruction, the Mexican garrison surrendered on March 29th. Veracruz became a vital American base of operations, opening the road to the capital. From Veracruz, Scott's army advanced toward Mexico City along the National Road, but the path was heavily defended. At Cerro Gordo in April, Santa Anna's forces blocked the mountain passes with over 10,000 men. Scott responded with skill. Guided by local intelligence, he sent part of his army through rugged terrain to outflank the Mexican positions. The maneuver succeeded, and U.S. troops stormed the defenses, forcing Santa Anna to retreat. The road to the capital lay open. As Scott's army approached Mexico City in August 1847, some of the fiercest battles of the war erupted. The Battle of Contreras, also known as the Battle of Padierna, took place on 1920 August 1847. The American forces surprised and routed the Mexican forces of General Gabriel Valencia, who had disobeyed General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna's orders for his forces' placement. About 300 Americans and 700 Mexicans were killed. Immediately, the two armies re-engaged in the Battle of Churubusco. It was the battle where the San Patricio Battalion, made up mainly of U.S. deserters, made their last stand against U.S. forces. The U.S. Army was victorious, outnumbering the defending Mexican troops. After the battle, the American Army was only 5 miles away from Mexico City. The U.S. Army executed 50 St. Patrick's Battalion members, all but 2 by hanging. Collectively, this was the largest mass execution in United States history. On September 8, 1847, the Battle of Molino del Rey happened. The Mexican forces were under General Antonio Leon against an American force under Major General Winfield Scott. About 116 Americans and 269 Mexicans were killed. On September 13th, General Winfield Scott's American forces were at the doorstep of Mexico City. They fought the Mexicans at the fortress of Chapultepec, perched on a hill guarding the capital. The American artillery opened a furious bombardment, and the American infantry surged uphill under heavy fire. The fighting was desperate, and the defenders fought with courage, despite being outnumbered. Among them were a group of cadets, teenagers, who resisted until the end. Known as Los Niños Héroes, their sacrifice became a lasting symbol of Mexican patriotism and sacrifice. One cadet, legend says, wrapped himself in the Mexican flag and leapt from the walls rather than surrender. By afternoon, U.S. forces had taken Chapultepec. The road into Mexico City lay open. About 140 Americans and 200 Mexicans were killed. The fall of Chapultepec led to a key engagement known as the Battle of San Belen and Cosme Gate. The battle involved coordinated attacks by General Winfield Scott's forces on 2 entry points into the city, the San Cosme Gate and the Belen Gate. General Scott arrived at the castle and was mobbed by cheering American soldiers following their victory. The Mexican commander Santa Anna had about 12,000 troops in the city. He eventually surrendered, and Scott's army took control of the city. 6 of Santa Anna's generals were taken prisoner, 2 of whom were executed. The victory was complete, but the cost was high. Thousands of soldiers on both sides had died, and Mexico's spirit was deeply wounded. The Mexican public outrage against Santa Anna resulted in his leaving the presidency on September 26th, and a provisional government was established. With its capital captured, Mexico had little choice but to negotiate peace. So, the Mexican-American War finally concluded on February 2, 1848, with the signing of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. The terms were staggering. Mexico recognized the Rio Grande as the border of Texas, Even more, it ceded vast territories to the United States, including California, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, and parts of Colorado and Wyoming. In all, Mexico lost about half of its territory. The U.S. buried and collected its dead in what is now called the Mexico City National Cemetery in Colonia San Rafael, about a mile north of the U.S. Embassy. In exchange, the United States paid Mexico $15 million and assumed certain claims against the Mexican government. For the U.S., the war fulfilled its dream of Manifest Destiny, securing a continental empire stretching from the Atlantic to the Pacific. For Mexico, it was a national tragedy, a defeat that reshaped its future. The guns fell silent, but the consequences of the war would echo for decades to come, shaping politics, igniting debates, and leaving scars on both nations. To understand the true legacy of the Mexican-American War, we must look at its aftermath. As I said, with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, the Mexican-American War officially ended. Yet wars rarely end with signatures on paper. The true legacy lay in the consequences that followed, consequences that would shape both nations for generations. Although the U.S. emerged victorious and vastly expanded, its triumph carried a hidden cost. With so much new land, an old question resurfaced. Would slavery expand into these territories? The debate would fracture American politics, deepen sectional tensions, and ultimately push the nation toward its deadliest conflict, the Civil War. For Mexico, the war was a devastating loss. Half of its national territory was gone. The Mexican people were left with bitterness, humiliation, and a determination to preserve what remained. In the decades that followed, Mexico struggled with political instability, foreign invasions, and civil conflict. Yet out of this tragedy, a deeper sense of Mexican national identity emerged. The memory of resistance, especially the heroism at Chapultepec, became part of Mexico's soul. Tens of thousands of soldiers and civilians lost their lives. Disease killed more men than bullets. Families were torn apart, communities devastated, and borders redrawn, not just on maps, but on human hearts. The Mexican-American War was more than a clash of armies. It was a turning point, a collision of ambition, pride, and destiny. For the United States, it brought power and expansion. For Mexico, it brought loss, but also resilience. And even today, its legacy lingers, in borders, in politics, and in the shared, often complicated history of two neighboring nations. Let us know what you think of the war. Thank you.